finance ministry, our finance minister has also several times has said, Nirmala Sitharaman, that India is achieving VC. Hello all, I am Vivek and I am going to discuss the UPSC Economy Mains questions, the exam which happened few days back. So let us discuss the paper 3 economy questions. In this year, there were around 8 questions in economy. And first, let me tell you briefly about the pattern of questions. This time, the questions from economy were relatively simpler as compared to the previous years. They are quite generic questions and there are only one or two current based questions. Most of the questions are based on static things or past things basically. So current affairs questions are less, but even to write the static things, you should be aware about the present things. So as I have already told in the class also, that while you are studying economy, always try to keep a balanced approach between the conceptual part and the current affairs part, because once you know both these things, then only you will be able to write a better answer. So this year question paper also, it would have been better, those students would have understood concepts, they would have been able to write this answer in a much better way. So let us start with the questions. So the first question was, explain the difference between the computing methodology of India's GDP before 2015 and after 2015. Now let me tell you one thing. In 2015, there was some methodology change in the GDP calculation, and this was reported everywhere. In economic survey also, in almost in every newspaper, this was there at that time also, and it is being repeated several times. I have mentioned in the book also about the GDP calculation methodology, and in the class also I have told exactly in the prep ladder class what I have taken. There also I have exactly told what's the difference. So everywhere to every student this was known. So I would consider this as a simple question, just you need to explain that. And it was a 10 marker question, so around 150 marks you had to write. Now just let me also tell you about how you should proceed with this question. Since UPSC has asked that you need to explain the difference between the calculation methodology of GDP. So first you need to find out that what are the keywords in this question. So the keyword is, one is you need to find out the difference, then GDP, and then what's the basically 2015, before 2015 and after 2015. So GDP and the difference of calculation methodology. So how to start this question? How will you start? Since the question is based on GDP, so the first and the most important thing is you can define GDP, that GDP is the final value of goods and services in a particular year. Then, see, generally in introduction, we try to briefly tell about the topic. Now, you can also write that why we change this. So, as per the United Nations recommendation, we changed this methodology. And then you can write that what are the basic changes that happen, as the question is of only 150 words. So briefly in 2-3 lines you need to give about the definition, and then you need to write about the differences. Now there was one very important difference that happened, and you must write that difference at the first point. And what was that difference? The difference was that we moved in GDP calculation. Earlier we used to calculate GDP at factor cost, and then from factor cost, from 2015 onwards, we moved to market prices. This was the most important difference that was introduced in 2015. So what happened that earlier we calculate basically GDP market price is equal to GDP factor cost plus product taxes minus product subsidies. So this was the formula through which earlier we used to calculate GDP. So there were two changes that happened here. One was, see, one change that happened is earlier we used to represent GDP at factor cost. From 2015 onwards, we started representing GDP at market price, right? So we moved from, so earlier, before 2015, when someone used to ask what is GDP, we used to say about this figure. And post 2015, we started representing this as the GDP, right, at market price. Why? Because this was the international practice and recommended by United Nations Accounts Department. So this is one thing. And second thing is this calculation also changed a little bit. So earlier GDP market price was based on factor cost, as you are seeing in this formula. What changed here is we introduced a GVA concept at basic prices. At basic prices. This we started calculating at GVA factor cost plus production taxes. Production, earlier this was a product taxes, this is production taxes minus production subsidy. So we started calculating basic. Earlier we used to calculate at factor cost. The industry-wise estimates we used to calculate at factor cost. Then we moved to basic prices. So now post 2015 we started calculating for every sector, we started calculating GVA basic prices. Earlier we used to calculate estimate industry-wise, we used to calculate GVA factor cost. Earlier we used to calculate this. So this is one change. And then we started representing GDP market price rather than GDP factor cost. So these two statements I have explained in the first point and the second point, right? And then there was one also change happened. It was not specifically mentioned by United Nations Systems of National Accounts, but what happened is that Ministry of Corporate Affairs created a new database, MCA 21, and that MCA 21 has all the industries and services data of basically of non-agricultural industry. Now, when in 2015 we changed the GDP methodology, after that we started using the national NSO started using this MCA 21 database for the estimation of GVA of different industries. Earlier we used to collect the data from annual survey of industries on sample basis. Then we moved to MCA 21 database to get all the data of manufacturing and services of all the companies. So this is another change happened. And one minor change, you can say that in 2015 we moved to a new series of base year from 2004-5 to 2011-12. So these were the 2004-5 to 2011-12. So these were the changes that happened. And in the conclusion part, you can say that, see, once this change happened, then a lot of concerns by some economists were raised that the calculation methodology is not correct or GDP figures are overinflated. And then after a team from IMF came also, but nothing wrong has been found. So in the conclusion part, you should try to write something relating with the current, or if any information is available with that issue. So since a lot of issues, time and again this has been raised by a lot of economists, issues has been raised that the GDP calculation is not coming correct. So you should tell them that you are aware about this. So you can write in the conclusion part that by adopting these changes, India moved to the international standards, and although some doubts were raised about the calculation methodology, but as such there is no wrong has been found. So this way you can attempt this question. Quite simple question. Those who would knew this change, they will be able to write it. Now let's move on to the second question. Distinguish between capital and revenue budget and explain the components of both. I think this was the most simple question. Each and every student who is preparing for UPSC, they know about the difference. So nothing much to explain in this question, but still the keywords here are capital budget and revenue budget. You need to explain the difference, and you also need to explain about their components. So some information, what you can write in this, see, the definition of course you will be writing and explaining, but what you should think always that what you can write something extra or some unique thing to fetch extra marks. So what unique thing you can write about the capital and revenue budget? I have told in the class also while teaching that revenue budget and capital budget, it is asking about the differences. Why we separate the revenue budget and the capital budget? Because it is a constitutional requirement. So if someone is going to write this, then definitely he or she can get 1 or 2 marks extra. So quoting the constitution, see what I have done is, I have written that as per article 112, the budget must distinguish between the revenue and other expenses. So if someone is going to write this in the introduction, definitely it's a good point. And then I have, since they are asking about the differences, I have elaborated them into the tabular format. It's the best. So revenue budget, capital budget, we have revenue receipts, revenue expenses, capital receipts, capital expenditure. Everyone knows the differences. And since they are also asking about the components of revenue and capital, so in the components you can write what are the revenue budgets, what are the different components, tax, non-tax, revenue expenses. Also you can write the components as I have written here. See, these are the components basically. And you can also, if you have as it was only 150 word question, so you can also draw into this form also, because they are asking the components, so you can show the component in this format also. And I have in the class repeatedly I have told you that you can't remember a lot of economic data, right? It's very difficult for students to remember a lot of data, but from every chapter you must remember a generic data, major data, generic data, which can be used in any kind of question coming from that topic. This thing I have, this statement I have told you in the class also. And while teaching the budget, I have told you that, as you know that, you know the GDP figure, right? Like last year it was around 197.5 lakh crore. In the same way, every UPSC aspirant must also remember that what is the budget of Government of India. Some approx figure, may not be exact. I have told this class that you use this figure if any kind of mains question is coming and you know about the government budgeted figure, you can use that. And all the students who would have remembered this, they can definitely use this. Government of India budget for 2021-22 is 35 lakh crore approximately. And out of that, I have also told this that revenue budget is around 29 lakh crore and capital budget is 5.5 lakh crore. So those students who are going to write this, definitely they will fetch extra marks, because the question is asking about the revenue and capital budget. So total budget 35 lakh crore and then revenue and capital budget, if you can write, that's the best thing. So always remember this government, you have to, in the syllabus it has been written Government of India budget you need to prepare. So you must remember this. This was expected, right? So quite simple question as such. Moving to the next question. How did land reforms in some parts of the, so the question is about land reforms in some parts of the country help to improve socio-economic conditions of marginal and small farmers. So we have discussed this land reforms in the class. So this question is asking, how did land reforms in some parts? So land reforms, everyone knows that what land reforms were implemented, but you have to relate with the small and marginal farmers, their improvement of socio-economic conditions. So how to start this question, what you should write in the introduction part? First thing, since the question is about land reforms, so the first thing that you should do is, in just one, because this was also a 10 marker, so 150 words question, 150 words you need to write. So what you can do is, since the question is based on land reform, so 1 or 2 lines you can explain the definition, that what do you understand by land reform. So first you can define land reform, right? Second, you can tell, see, as the question is asking about its impact on small and marginal farmers' socio-economic conditions. But since the question is on land reform, you must also tell that what land reforms were introduced. Even if it is not asked directly, but you must write, because the question is on land reforms. So first you can define that land reform is the distribution of land from the those people who are holding more lands to the landless people. Then you can write these were the land reforms that were done in the post-independence period. Then you can tell that how those reforms helped in improving the socio-economic conditions. So you all know what were the land reforms that were done: Jamindari reforms, tenancy reforms, land ceiling and distribution, and then relate this that how it helped. So as such, you may not remember the data exactly. So if you remember the data that how many farmers it helped in, then it's fine. But otherwise also you can write that land reforms helped in. So what happened in the Jamindari reforms? Jamindars lost the ownership rights, and that land was given to the tenants and other people who were cultivating on that piece of land. So a lot of tenants became the landowner. So if you remember the tenant, then you can write. Otherwise also in general you can say that a lot of tenants became. Then land ceiling and distribution also. So you can write this as I have written here, point tenancy reforms. So since the question is saying about the question is saying that in some parts of the country. So if you remember that land reforms helped in which parts of exactly more, it helped more, then you can write those states, those areas. Otherwise you may ignore also. So land reforms, tenancy reforms, it helped more in West Bengal, Kerala, right, Tamil Nadu. So I have written the tenancy reforms led to more than 1 crore tenants getting the ownership right. Then in the land ceiling and distributions, more farmers, more people from landless people from the West Bengal, they got ownership right. Or you can write in general also if you don't remember. And then what I have written that since landlords were not very much interested in improvement of the land and its returns, now when the actual cultivator, the land was given to the actual cultivator, definitely they multiplied their gains, they put more effort, and with this income, with the increase of the income and with the ownership of the land, their social standard also changed, social status also changed because of the ownership in the agricultural land. So these things you can write. And since the question is asking about the land reforms and socio-economic change, so you have written that this change has happened, but you can, in the conclusion, you can also write that there are certain gaps still remaining, there are certain things which yet need to be improved for the small and marginal farmers. So as I told you that in the conclusion part, if there are certain current happenings which you know, which you are aware about, then you can relate those current happenings in the conclusion part. So the question is about land reforms. Any land reform that you know in the current scenario. So government in the last few years, 2016, government has given the land ceiling and distribution, model agricultural tenancy law to the states to implement it. So you can write that center has given it to the states, and if states implement, definitely it will help small and marginal farmers to further extent. So anything related to current you can write. Then coming to the next question, how and what. So two words, how and what extent. Micro irrigation help in solving India's water crisis. So two things, how and help, micro irrigation and water crisis. So now to start with, you can tell something about the water crisis. You can tell something about the water crisis which India is facing. Then second, and again this is a 10 marker question, so you need to write less. So something you can tell about the water crisis. Then you can also write that why is this water crisis? Because the question is asking that how micro irrigation, how and to what extent micro irrigation can help. So first you should know that why is this crisis. So just since it is not directly asked that why is this crisis, so you need to just precisely mention that what the crisis we are facing and why, because of what reasons we are facing. And then you can define, of course the question is on micro irrigation, so you should briefly define micro irrigation also, that micro irrigation using drip technology, bamboo irrigation, micro sprinklers, all this comes under micro irrigation. You need to define precisely micro irrigation, and then you need to tell that how it is going to help. Since micro irrigation, it's quite efficient, so you can write all those things. And you also need to write that since Indian agriculture farmers mostly use flood irrigation, so there is a scope for micro irrigation. So these things, right? And so the question is how. First thing is how, and then to what extent. If you can address these things separately, it's fine, but otherwise you can write in a combined manner also. So how it can, so the first question is how it can help. So what do you think how it can help micro irrigation? See, the first thing is most of the Indian farmers in the most prominent cropping pattern is wheat plus rice in India, right? Wheat, rice and sugarcane, these three crops are called water guzzling crops, right? And these three crops are procured by government, two crops, wheat and rice by government and one by sugarcane by the mill owners. And government is providing subsidy on this. So how micro irrigation can help? The one and the very important point is that micro irrigation is mostly helpful for horticulture crops and other high value crops. It may not be micro irrigation can be used for wheat and paddy also, but not to that extent. So the first thing is, if government really wants to promote micro irrigation, then the farmers need to shift to those crops which can use micro irrigation. So government will have to support those crops which are going to use water efficiently rather than wheat and rice. Presently, government is supporting wheat and rice. So how micro irrigation can help? Of course, you'll have to write one or two lines about the technology that micro irrigation pipes are laid down and drip by drip water comes on it. The water is given only at the roots. So of course, water is being efficiently used. And you also need to tell that government need to move to those crops, subsidize or support those crops which can use micro irrigation technology. This can also be suggested. To what extent? This is also important, because the question asks to what extent. Do you think that all the full irrigation can be converted into micro irrigation? Right now, most of the farmers are using flood irrigation. Is it possible? No, not much. Why? Because micro irrigation is costly. Micro irrigation, it requires initial infrastructure laying. So it's costly. And 86% of our farmers are small and marginal. So to what extent, don't need to specify the exact person that 70 to 80% can be shifted. You can just say that yes, to a certain extent it is possible to shift farmers into micro irrigation, but for that it requires government support in terms of technology, government support in terms of initial investment, government support in terms of procurement also of those crops which can be supported through micro irrigation. So these points you can write. And in the conclusion part, and yes, see, if you are writing any question, and if possible, try to remember any scheme related to that question. If you know that government has launched or anything regarding any scheme related to that topic, then you must write that is about that scheme. So micro irrigation, there is a scheme, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, and there is a component, major highlighted component is per drop more crop, which is basically related to drip and micro irrigation. So you must write about this scheme also, that government is taking measure of it. And in the conclusion, you can say that yes, micro irrigation can be done as it has been done in other countries. Israel is a best example. But you also need to suggest that these things must be done, then it can be done. So in the conclusion part, I have suggested certain things that you can write. Again, it will also be considered as a quite simple question. Then the next question is, do you agree that the Indian economy has recently experienced V-shaped recovery? So the keyword is V-shaped recovery. Give reasons in support of your answer. See, this was again because of the pandemic, this V-shaped recovery or W-shaped recovery or K-shaped recovery. This was in the news, quite debated. Some economists said it's V-shaped, some economists said it's W-shaped, V-shaped or K-shaped. If such kind of questions are coming, then you should also need to check, because everyone knew that this discussion was in the news. You should also think that what's the government's stand officially. Has government said anything about the economic recovery? If possible, you should take the government's stand if possible. You should try to take what if government has suggested something. See, this question desires that, do you agree? So if you don't agree that, even if you don't agree that the economy has not achieved V-shaped recovery, and if you write that, no, I don't agree, I think that the economy has reached K-shaped economy has experienced K-shaped recovery. Then if you can justify that K-shaped recovery, then also you will get marks. Of course, then also you can get, because this is just asking, do you agree? So if you are not agreeing, you will have to tell the reasons, justify that why you are not agreeing, and what kind of recovery you think, that also you'll have to justify. So if you are able to justify, then of course, then also you will get marks. Don't think that if you have written no, you will not get. This is not, because again it depends on what you think, and I will tell you that why there can be different opinion. This is possible. But the official stand, the government's stand, was in economic survey. Economic survey has clearly said that we are going to see, or we are seeing about, because it was presented in 2021, last year, January 2021. So it has said that we are going to see around V-shaped recovery. So economic survey has supported V-shaped recovery. And finance ministry, our finance minister has also several times has said, Nirmala Sitharaman, that India is achieving V-shaped recovery. So if possible, you should take the government's stand. So now coming to the question, do you agree that Indian economy has recently experienced V-shaped recovery? So first thing is that you can describe a little bit about 1 or 2 lines just about, because it's a 15 marker question, so you need to write in 250 words, right? So briefly tell about the COVID situation, that because of COVID we went into recession, because first recession happened, then only the talk of recovery and other things is going on. So first we tell about that because of the corona crisis, once in a century crisis, we faced recession. And then you need to write that we recovered quite fast. And then regarding the recovery, you can talk about. So what I have written is that, first thing is that we faced this crisis. Then if you remember the data, how much recession, how much dip happened, that's fine, and it was quite highlighted. So it may be possible that you remember the first quarter of 2021, we faced around 24% contraction. So you can write that. And after contracting, then comes the recovery. So recovery was also quite fast, around 20% in the first quarter of 2021-22. If you remember, you can write 20%. Otherwise, you can just write that we recovered quite fast. And see, since the question is about shape, V or something, you must draw the graph, because if the question demands V shape or K shape, then without drawing the graph, you won't be able to justify just by writing. And even if you say that, then it will be difficult to fetch marks. So if the question is about V or K, any kind of shape, then you must justify your logic with that shape. And that's where the doubt comes. Some students were confused that, sir, whether we have achieved V shape or K shape. Now the thing is that if you take now this recovery V or K or W, it depends on the parameter. if you will take the GDP figure, for example, see, let me draw the graph as such. So this here it is time, and here on the y-axis I am writing GDP. Right. Now, generally our GDP, the absolute value of GDP, if you remove this pandemic period, the absolute value of GDP, generally it has increased. It has never dipped as such. It has increased. So let's say our increase is around 7-8% growth. So this is 7% increase line. Right? Every year our GDP is increasing by 7%, 8%. Now, what happened in the pandemic year, let's say 2020, 21. What happened is that our GDP decreased. Earlier, GDP was not decreasing, just growth was changing. But in the pandemic year, our GDP absolute value decreased, production. So this was the normal curve. But suppose this is the contraction year 2021. So here what happened that our GDP declined. So if I will have to draw the graph, this just one sec. So what exactly happened is that we were growing at this rate, and then it dipped, declined, and then it again moved. Then we started growing like this. So this has happened. So the absolute value of GDP has come down, and then it has recovered very fast, 20%. So there was a dip. So if you can show this graph, and even if you draw the GDP growth data year and percentage growth, then also this kind of graph is coming. Right? So you can show this graph and prove that yes, the recovery was. And this is about GDP and GDP growth data. There are several parameters like GST, tax collection, index of industrial production, core industries. Now, all the parameters may not have achieved V-shaped recovery. Some has achieved W-shaped recovery, dip, increased, and then again dipped. Some has achieved K-shaped recovery. But since the question is asking about Indian economy, now GDP and GDP growth are considered as the benchmark, the most important parameter of economy, macroeconomic, most important parameter. So it is talking about the overall economic recovery. So better to use the GDP or GDP growth data. So it may be possible that the other parameters like IIP, core industry, GST, tax collection may have received certain other kind of recovery. But this GDP, if you'll talk about, then it has achieved V-shaped recovery. If you will go into the quarterly figures, then the shape may vary a little bit. If you will go into I have drawn annual figures. This is 2019-20 annual figure, 2021-22. If you will draw every quarter data, then the shape may vary. But if the question is asking V-shaped recovery, you have the data of V-shape, you draw it, justify it, and move. Because some other parameter, if you will take, the shape may vary. And that's where the debate was that whether it's V-shape or K-shape, right? So first I have written about the crisis, then dip, and then we recovered, and then this graph I have shown about. This graph about the GDP growth. So this I also have written that the other high frequency indicators, they also have shown V-shaped recovery. And see, since it was a controversial thing and a lot of economists have said that the shape is not V-shaped, and if you are aware about this, you should also write about the other views, because the question is, do you agree? That means there are other views also. So if you are aware, you write about, not in detail because the question is not that, but in briefly you must tell that there are other discussions also about V-shape or K-shape that I have written here. And again, in the conclusion part, as I said that if you are aware about any current happenings related to that question, so the question is about slowdown recovery, then you must tell that government implemented Atmanirbhar Bharat reforms and RBI pumped liquidity. to bring the economy, to recover the economy. So that's what I have written at the end, right? So of course, you can also add few more points or delete, but this way you can handle the question. Now the next question is, investment in infrastructure is essential for more rapid and inclusive economic growth. Discuss in light of India's experience. Now again, a quite simple question, a very straightforward question. Investment in infrastructure, this is one thing. Second is rapid and inclusive economic growth. So you have to tell about the impact of investment in infrastructure sector basically on rapid, inclusive and economic growth. Now first, as it is a 15 marker question, so first you should talk in general about the infrastructure. You should talk about the infrastructure sector, that how exactly infrastructure sector helps, or is there any specific characteristic of infrastructure sector, how it boosts economic growth or inclusive growth. So infrastructure sector I have also told in the class and have talked in the book also, that infrastructure spending, generally what happens that whenever an economy faces recession, generally government starts spending a lot on infrastructure, because infrastructure has a very strong linkage with economic recovery in two ways: short term, long term. Short term, it boosts the demand. In the long term, it increases the efficiency, productive capacity of the economy. And both these impact the growth. So if you are aware, you can write this thing, what I have written. Infrastructure has been recognized as one of the most important enabler of economic growth. This word is important. And then you can talk a little bit about COVID. Just I have related this in, see, government right now is spending a lot on infrastructure. You can relate this with the COVID recession. So first thing I have written these 2 points, short term and long term, how it can help. And then it leads to inclusive growth. See, first thing basically it talked about the rapid growth I have talked, and then second, how it, because it is asking about inclusive growth specifically, taking the examples from India. So how it is going to impact inclusive growth. So you will have to specifically relate infrastructure and inclusive growth, right? So how can we, first we think about that, how we can achieve inclusive growth. Inclusive growth means growth should happen in those sectors where the poor work. Growth should happen in those areas where poor live. Growth should happen in those, growth should use those factors of production which poor possess. This is called inclusive growth. So relate infrastructure with this. So write that when government spends into infrastructure, it uses unskilled labor, causing inclusive growth. When government spends in infrastructure, in rural infrastructure, it employs a lot of uneducated people. This you can also write. When government spends a lot into infrastructure, rural and urban centers get connected. When rural and urban sector gets connected, a lot of people from rural area, they can get jobs. So you'll have to relate infrastructure and inclusive growth. That's what I have done in these points. And since it is asking about the India's example, so if you remember, if you can relate, you can write, because otherwise you can write about any project or some example. So I have written about the Golden Collateral Highway project, because when it was built, Golden Collateral project, there was a major newspaper articles that it has impacted growth. So Golden Collateral built in 1999 to 2003-4, and then it impacted growth, and our growth achieved 8%, 9%, 10%. So this you can write. And again, in the conclusion part, as I said, if you remember something current about that topic, so infrastructure, what's current happening? National Infrastructure Pipeline, National Monetization Pipeline. These are the two most important things in infrastructure. So this I have written in the conclusion part. Something positive, something related with the current, something related with any government scheme. Right? Then move to the next question. What are the, again, quite simple question. What are the salient features of National Food Security Act? Everywhere it is written, in every book, newspaper, everywhere it has been said time and again, and most of you must be knowing all this. So first is salient features of this act. And the second is, how has the food security bill helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition in India? Now, one thing which I have doubt is, in the first question, in the first part, they are saying National Food Security Act 2013. It was passed in 2013. Then in the second part, they say about the bill. But no need to go into all these intricate things. The question is same. First is salient features of National Food Security Act 2013. The second is about how it is impacting, how has it helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition. Before I discuss this question, I wanted to tell you one thing, that there is a recent trend which I am seeing in UPSC is that, and it is since last 2-3 years, if there is certain thing, for example, MSP. Now, if MSP has not been able to help poor farmers, everywhere it is being reported that MSP has not much helped poor farmers. Now, UPSC is asking question that how MSP has helped poor farmers. This kind of trend I am seeing. When everywhere, in every article, newspaper, journals, if this discussion is going on that this thing is not going to help much, then they will ask how it has helped. And if you search on Google, in a lot of articles it has been said that the Food Security Act has not much helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition. And here comes the question that how it has helped. So you may write your view, and then you can, in this kind of question, if you know, as such it will be difficult, because if it has not eliminated hunger and malnutrition, then you will not be able to find many points regarding how it helped. So you can just write one or two things how it helped, and then you can suggest that if you will do this thing, then it will help. This also you can do. So salient features, no need to tell, every student knows this. So 2-3 lines in the brief description you can write about what was the National Food Security Act, on how many people it is going to cover. Brief description about the National Food Security Act: 50% urban population, 75% rural population. In total 84 crore people it will cover. This is brief introduction. And then important features. Everyone knows this, that Antyodaya Anna Yojana, they will get 35 kg per month per family. Priority households 5 kg per month per person. Then through midday meal, pregnant women will get 6. These features you can write, no need to again elaborate. Then how I have written the second part of the answer, that how has the Food Security Bill helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition. So recently there was a National Family Health Survey report. So that report has indicated that there is very little impact of Food Security Bill on hunger and malnutrition. That means it has not much helped. So that I have quoted has marginal improvement in terms of eliminating hunger and malnutrition. So there are many factors which have resulted in such improvement. So there is only a marginal improvement. There are several factors. One is the Food Security Bill. But as I told you that if it has not helped much, then you can put your suggestions also. So that's what I have did. Because in PDS we don't have that quality check. So CAG has highlighted this point. If there are any official reports related to that topic, then you should try to quote it. Then quantity of food is also not sufficient. And anyways, government does not say that it is a sufficient quantity. PDS is incremental in nature. It is not meant for whatever is required that will be supplied. This is not the case. Then non-diversification. Mostly we are distributing wheat and rice. Of course, in the act says about that coarse grains also, but most of the states, most of the PDS, mostly wheat and rice is given, and that may be the reason. And the reason may be because our cropping pattern is mostly supporting wheat and rice. So this is one reason why it has not helped. And then nutrition. When we talk about the nutrition, it does not simply means food. This National Food Security Act delivers food, but nutrition depends Of course, it depends on food, but it depends on several other factors also that you need to tell about. It depends on health, water, sanitation, gender equality, gender perspectives, these things. And then in the conclusion part, I have related various schemes that how it can help in the eliminating hunger and malnutrition. So this way you can handle this question. Then I think the last question is this: what are the present challenges before crop diversification? Two-part question: how do emerging technologies provide opportunity for crop diversification? So since it is asking challenges to crop diversification, first you can diversify crops, adding new crops, changing the new cropping pattern. Either you change the cropping pattern or you start sowing new crops. That's basically diversification of crops. So you first write the definition of crop diversification, and then you can simply write the challenges of crop diversification. So there are several challenges of crop diversification in India. You can highlight the important challenges. As you know, what are the challenges? One major challenge before crop diversification is that only 50% of our area is covered under irrigation. That is one challenge. There is other challenge of better variety of seeds we don't have, new variety of seeds, research and development, then agri industries, then various kinds of we have weak research and extension services that I told you. Then post harvest facilities we don't have. Post harvest management is quite weak. So there are several challenges that you can write it. These are quite simple as such. Then it talks about how emerging technologies provides opportunity for crop diversification. So you need to, the second part, you need to talk about the emerging technologies in agriculture. What are the emerging technologies? It is artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, precision farming, smart farming. We are using drones, AI cameras to monitor the farm. These things you can discuss. So how emerging technologies can help in crop diversification? So you'll have to relate this thing. You just don't need to write the point. What you need to do is see, the question says how emerging technologies can help crop diversification. Now, in India, crop diversification is not happening because we don't have better variety of seeds of other new crops. So if emerging technologies can provide those seeds, so emerging technology, we have research and biotechnology, genetic engineering, this is also an emerging technology. So if these technologies, through these technology we can produce better variety of seeds, then crop diversification can happen. A lot of farmers, suppose a farmer is growing wheat and rice, he does not want to diversify into horticulture crops because horticulture crops are risky. There are more pest attack on horticulture crops. That's why he is not able to, he does not want to diversify. So if you can say that emerging technologies can help in reducing pest effect, emerging technologies can help in minimizing the attack or reducing the problems that the new or horticulture crops face, then it can lead to crop diversification. We are also not doing crop diversification. Farmers are doing the same crop or cropping pattern because of less resources, either water or fertilizer or something. Now, if emerging technologies can help us in minimizing or moving towards efficient resources, then also our farmers can diversify crops. So you have to relate with the statement that with the emerging technologies like drones fitted with artificial intelligence camera, they can exactly monitor the farm. They can exactly pinpoint that which part of the crop is having pest attack or which part of the crop requires water, and if we can apply the inputs specifically on that point, so in very less amount of resources we can cultivate all those crops. So if this technology comes to farmer, of course farmers will be willing to diversify. So you'll have to relate these statements and write the answer. That's the best way to fetch extra marks. because whatever is the question, you must serve the need of the question, what exactly it is asking. You just don't start writing all the notes. You'll have to relate it, right? And then conclusion, you can write that, see, it talks about technology. Then you can relate that since in India, the labor force is mostly trying to move towards manufacturing and services. So, of course, the future of agriculture is that embracing new technologies and reducing the labor. So, in this way, you can answer the question. So, that's all about the economy questions. And again, see, this was about 2021 UPSC mains. And I would like to suggest 2-3 things regarding economy mains specifically. Again, see, this year the question was quite easy, straightforward, and generic questions. But it will not be always. In the next year, it can totally change. They can specifically pinpoint the issue. They can ask about specific things. It can be totally current based. It can be purely static. The best strategy is first understand the concept and then keep on updating yourself with the current happenings. And while you are reading this, try to relate things. Try to analyze the impact, relation. If any topic you are studying, try to relate with other topics, how it can be related. And try to write answers. Because just knowledge will not help you. You need to write a lot of answers. Practice. So that will help you. And that's all from my side. So thank you and best of luck for all those who have given this means. Thank you.